I still remember the way the light fell that afternoon, slanting through the garage window, cutting through the dust that hung in the air like faint ghosts of all the years she hadn't been here. The wrench slipped once in my hand, scraping against metal, and before I could curse, she said my name. "Easy," she murmured, her voice steady, practiced, the kind of tone that could quiet a storm if she wanted it to. I looked up, and there she was. I hadn't seen her in nearly 5 years. My aunt, though the word felt strange now, like a title borrowed from another life. She looked the same, but not really. Her hair was shorter, darker, her eyes sharper, somehow. There was a confidence about her that didn't match the woman I used to know, the one who used to sit on our porch with a book, laughing softly at my clumsy jokes. She walked into the workshop like she didn't quite belong there, her pressed coat brushing against stacks of spare parts, the smell of oil mixing with her perfume. A strange combination that somehow worked. "I didn't think you'd still be here," she said, scanning the half-fixed motorcycle behind me. "Didn't think you'd ever come back." She smiled then, a small, almost guilty thing, and looked away. That pause, right there, said more than anything else could. I could feel it, the air thickening with all the unspoken years. She handed me a thermos, the same kind she used to bring when I was younger. "Coffee. Figured you'd still drink it too strong." I took it, trying not to look too long at her hand. Manicured, steady, familiar. "You still remember? Some things don't go away just because we want them to." She said it quietly, eyes on the workbench, but something in her voice made me forget what I was doing. I watched the way her fingers traced the rim of an old socket wrench, almost absently, like she was touching a memory instead of metal. "Uncle still in the city?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She hesitated. "He left." Just that. 2 words, and the whole world seemed to pause around us. Outside, a car passed. Inside, it was just the ticking clock, the smell of coffee, and the faint echo of her words. I turned the wrench, maybe harder than I needed to, just to have something to do. "Sorry. I didn't mean to." "No," she said quickly. "It's fine. It's just strange being back." She moved closer, the edge of her coat brushing my arm. The contact was light, accidental, but my body reacted before my mind did. I froze. She noticed. Of course she did. She always noticed. Her hand lingered, just for a second, then slid down my sleeve, fingers following the faint line of grease on my arm. Slow, careful, deliberate in a way that made my breath catch. "I promised to watch over you," she whispered, her tone barely above the hum of the fluorescent light. Then, softer still, "But not like this." And before I could say anything, she stepped back, her face unreadable again, her hand now busy adjusting her coat, as if nothing had happened. The moment dissolved, but not for me. I finished the repairs long after she left, though I couldn't tell you how. Every sound, the clink of tools, the hiss of oil, felt like background noise to a scene I couldn't stop replaying. The warmth of her hand, the tremor in her voice, the look in her eyes before she turned away. I told myself it was nothing, that it was just the shock of seeing her again, the odd intimacy of old memories colliding with the present. But that night, when I lay in bed, I still felt the trail her fingers had drawn down my arm, as if the moment hadn't really ended at all. And I knew I wouldn't sleep. Not yet. Not after that. She came by again the next morning, pretending it was about the car. Said something about the engine sounding off, though I could tell she didn't really care about the noise. She lingered by the doorway longer than someone who just wanted to tune up. Her hand rested on the doorframe, the way people do when they're unsure whether to step inside. I wiped my hands on a rag and nodded toward the car. "Pop the hood." She did, moving carefully, deliberate, like she wanted to appear composed. But there was a kind of tension to her today, the kind that sits behind the eyes. While I checked the oil, she stood a few feet away, not watching the car, watching me. I could feel it. "You still doing this full time?" she asked. "Yeah. It pays enough to keep the lights on." She smiled faintly. "I remember when you couldn't even hold a wrench straight." I laughed under my breath. "Guess some things change." Her expression softened, almost proud, then faded into something else. Regret, maybe, or exhaustion. The kind that doesn't come from lack of sleep, the kind that comes from too much living. She rubbed her hands together. Not cold, just restless. Her nails were clean, short, practical. There was a faint mark on her wrist, a thin white scar I hadn't noticed before. She caught me looking and pulled her sleeve down. "Old burn," she said quietly. "Doesn't matter." I wanted to ask what happened, but she was already glancing at the ground, ending the subject before it began. We worked mostly in silence after that. She handed me tools when I asked, quick and efficient. Every once in a while, her fingers brushed mine. It wasn't intentional, I could tell, but it did something strange to the air between us. At one point, I caught her staring at nothing. Just the cracked wall behind the workbench, eyes unfocused, lips parted like she was somewhere else entirely. "You okay?" I asked. She blinked, startled, then nodded. "Just thinking." "About?" She hesitated, a long, measured pause. "About how fast time moves when you're not paying attention." There was a sadness in the way she said it, like she was mourning something that hadn't died, just drifted out of reach. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, charged, the kind that fills every inch of space with things neither of us could say. I watched her laugh once, briefly, when a streak of oil smudged across her wrist, and I made a joke about her being officially initiated. It wasn't a full laugh, more like a breath that decided to sound alive for a second. But it was real. And then, as I leaned closer to check the wiring under the hood, I felt her near again. The faintest trace of her perfume, clean, sharp, like jasmine caught in dust. When I looked up, she was watching me, eyes tired but steady, lips pressed together as if she'd almost said something and changed her mind. "Thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For still being here." Her voice cracked on the last word, so soft I almost missed it. I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because in that moment, I realized she wasn't just talking about the car or the garage or even me. She was talking about something she'd lost the courage to name. She turned to leave, and as she passed me, her hand brushed my shoulder. Barely there, a whisper of touch, but enough to make the world pause again. And when she was gone, the air still carried the shape of her presence. Like static that wouldn't fade. The storm came out of nowhere. One of those summer downpours that turns everything dim and close, the kind that traps you where you are. She'd stopped by again, said she was just dropping off paperwork for the garage, though I didn't remember ever needing paperwork from her. I didn't question it. When the rain started, it hit the roof like static, drowning out everything else. The power flickered once, then again, and the radio went silent. Just the two of us, the hum of rain, and a single hanging bulb swaying above the workbench. She sighed. "Guess I'm not driving home anytime soon." "You can wait it out," I said, trying to sound casual. "Coffee's still warm." We sat at the small table near the back, the one cluttered with old invoices and half-used sandpaper. She pushed the papers aside and leaned her elbows on the surface, chin resting in her hand. For a moment, she looked younger, not by age, but by how she let her guard slip. The storm made her hair curl slightly around her face, a few strands sticking to her temple. She brushed them away with an absent motion. Her fingers trembled just enough to notice. "You still living alone?" I asked before thinking. She didn't look at me. "Yeah, guess I got used to the quiet." Then, with a soft, tired smile, "Though sometimes it feels like the quiet's the one that got used to me." Something in my chest twisted at that. I wanted to tell her I'd been thinking about her, that every visit felt like she was unspooling something I didn't have the words for. But I didn't. I just watched her trace circles on the tabletop with her thumb. Thunder rolled somewhere far off. She reached for the mug, and our hands brushed again. Neither of us moved. The touch lasted too long. Not accidental, not quite deliberate. Just long enough for me to feel the pulse in my wrist kick up. Her eyes lifted to mine. Not searching, knowing. Then her phone buzzed on the table. A man's name flashed across the screen, one I recognized from family gatherings years ago. Her ex. She stared at it, motionless, the sound filling the silence like a warning. Then, slowly, she turned the phone over, face down. "You're not going to answer?" I asked quietly. "No," she said, voice low. "Not tonight." Her hand stayed near the phone, fingers tense. I could see the faint shimmer of a tear she never let fall, catching the light just before she blinked it away. I wanted to reach out, to touch her hand, to tell her I understood even if I didn't. But instead, I said, "He still call often?" "Only when he remembers I exist." She laughed softly, but it broke halfway through. Lightning flashed, quick, white, harsh. For a second, it lit her face in full, and I saw it. The exhaustion, the ache, the strange, careful longing she tried to hide every time she looked at me. She turned her head, and I knew she felt me watching her. The silence between us thickened again, not heavy this time, just alive. "You should get some rest," I said finally, my voice not as steady as I wanted. She didn't move, just looked at me for a long time, as if weighing something impossible. Then she leaned forward, barely an inch, close enough that I could feel her breath, smell the faint trace of jasmine and rain. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Then she pulled back, stood up, and said quietly, "You shouldn't look at me like that." And before I could answer, she was gone. Just the sound of rain and the soft sway of the light above, still trembling from where she'd brushed past it. The next time she came by, there was no reason left to hide behind. No car, no errands, no pretense. She just appeared at the doorway after closing, her coat damp from the evening fog, her hair tied back like she hadn't planned to stay long. But she did. I was cleaning up, putting tools away, sweeping the concrete floor, when I noticed her still standing there. "You didn't knock?" I said, half smiling, trying to sound casual. She didn't return it. "Would you have told me to leave if I had?" I stopped sweeping. "Probably not." She took a step inside, her shoes echoing in the hollow quiet. The air between us felt thin, stretched, fragile, as if one wrong word could make it snap. "I've been thinking," she said finally, her voice soft but steady. "About us. About whatever this is." I didn't say anything. Didn't trust myself to. She looked around the room like she needed something to focus on. The half-finished engine, the hanging light, the rain starting up again outside. Anything but my eyes. "I shouldn't be here," she continued. "Every time I walk through that door, I tell myself it's the last time." "Then why do you?" That made her look at me. Really look. And for a second, I saw everything she was trying not to say. All the contradictions, the guilt, the hunger to be understood. "Because when I'm here," she whispered, "I forget who I'm supposed to be." The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It pressed against my ribs. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable," I said finally. She laughed, a quiet, bitter sound. "You don't. That's the problem." She moved closer, one small step at a time. The distance between us shrank until I could see the faint shimmer of moisture on her lashes. "This isn't right," she said, shaking her head. "It's not supposed to feel like this." I wanted to agree, to say something that would break the tension, but my throat tightened. My hands were still dirty from grease and dust. Hers were clean and trembling. "Tell me to stop coming here," she said. "Tell me to go." "I can't." The words came out before I could think. She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them again, something raw and unguarded in her face. "You're too young to understand what this kind of silence does to people," she said, her voice cracking. "You think it's nothing, just moments that pass. But it stays. It stays inside you." I didn't move. Neither did she. We just stood there, the sound of rain against the metal roof keeping time with everything we weren't saying. Finally, she exhaled, a long, trembling breath. "You make me remember who I used to be," she said. There was no warmth in her tone this time, only a kind of ache, like remembering was a wound she couldn't stop touching. Then, quieter still, almost to herself, "And I don't know if I forgive you for that." It was a week before I saw her again. Long enough for the air to settle, but not enough for it to clear. She came late, after sunset. I was locking up when I saw her car pull in, headlights cutting through the mist, engine idling longer than it needed to. When she stepped out, she was holding something, a small, creased envelope. She didn't meet my eyes at first, just stood there under the dim light, fingers tracing the edge of the paper like she was afraid of what it held. "I found this while cleaning out some boxes," she said, voice low. "It's yours. Or at least, it should have been." She handed it to me. The envelope was old, edges yellowed, my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. What is it? She hesitated. Something I never sent. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, her handwriting, younger, uneven. I read the first few lines and felt the ground tilt a little. You'll probably never read this. I just want to say I'm sorry for leaving the way I did. You were too young to understand, and I was too scared to explain. I thought distance would protect you from how broken I was. The words blurred for a second. I blinked hard, read them again. You wrote this when? The year I left, she said. After your father's accident. I couldn't stay. Every room in that house reminded me of everything I couldn't fix. She looked at me then, eyes shining in the faint light. You reminded me too much of him. The way you stood, the way you asked questions you weren't ready to hear the answers to. I thought if I stayed, I'd just keep seeing him through you. The storm outside hadn't started yet, but the air carried that same weight, the kind that makes your chest feel smaller. So that's why you disappeared? I asked quietly. She nodded. I thought I was doing the right thing. I didn't want to break what was still whole in you. I folded the letter, slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. You didn't. She laughed. Not cruelly, but like she didn't believe me. You don't mean that. I do. But you still left. She turned away then, her shoulders tight, her voice almost swallowed by the sound of crickets outside. You were just a boy. I didn't think you'd notice. I noticed. The silence that followed wasn't sharp this time. It was fragile, like a bridge that might hold or collapse. She finally sat on the workbench, the same spot she'd leaned against the first day she returned. Her eyes glistened, tired but softer than I'd ever seen them. I think part of me came back because I wanted to see if you turned out okay, she said. And part of me didn't want you to. I frowned. Why not? Because then I'd have to face the fact that you didn't need me at all. That line hit harder than it should have. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The world outside hummed quietly. Insects, wind, distant traffic. But inside, it was just her voice replaying in my head. I set the letter down on the table, careful not to look at it again. She reached out, touched my hand briefly. Not affection, not comfort. Just contact. Then she whispered, almost to herself. Sometimes I wonder if I came back to make peace, or to make things worse. It was near closing again when she came back. No storm this time. No excuse, no envelope. Just her, calm, quiet, different. The air between us didn't buzz anymore. It hummed. Low. Steady. Like something that had stopped trying to hide. She leaned against the counter while I finished locking the tool cabinets, her eyes following the motion of my hands. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Finally, she broke the silence. I've been thinking about what I said last time. Which part? She smiled faintly. The part where I wasn't sure why I came back. And I think I know now. I waited, but she didn't continue right away. She just sat down on the edge of the table, folded her hands, and stared at them like they held the right words if she looked long enough. When I left, she said finally, I told myself distance would protect everyone. That staying away meant I was being kind. But maybe I was just afraid of being known again. Her voice softened. And you? You've been here all along, not asking me to explain, not demanding anything. Just seeing me. I swallowed, unsure what to do with the heaviness in my chest. You make it sound like that's something rare. It is, she said quietly. Especially when you've spent half your life pretending you don't need it. The words lingered. She looked up at me then, and it was different this time. Not sharp, not guilty. Just open. Honest in a way that left nowhere to hide. I moved closer, slow enough for her to stop me if she wanted. She didn't. You don't have to keep apologizing, I said. Not for leaving, not for this. I get it now. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, she exhaled shakily, as if she'd been holding her breath for years. I don't know what this is, she admitted. I just know it doesn't feel wrong anymore. That hit something deep, not excitement, not relief. Just a quiet kind of truth that settled inside both of us. I sat beside her. The metal edge of the table creaked under our weight. Outside, the last of the light was fading, brushing gold across the floor. She reached for the coffee mug beside her, but her hand stopped halfway, resting instead on mine. The touch wasn't hesitant this time. It was soft, certain. We stayed like that, still, silent, breathing in the same rhythm. There were no promises, no questions, no future spoken into existence. Just the small reality of the moment. Her fingers over mine, her head leaning slightly against my shoulder, the faint scent of her hair when she exhaled. I used to think love was supposed to change everything, she whispered. But maybe it's just supposed to make being here a little easier. I didn't answer. There was nothing to add that wouldn't ruin the simplicity of it. The clock ticked in the corner. The air smelled faintly of oil and rain. And for the first time since she came back, neither of us looked away. That was the truth of it. No ending, no beginning. Just the quiet collapse into something that already was. It's strange how ordinary life looks after everything changes. The same roads, the same sounds, but quieter somehow. As if the world knows to lower its voice when something inside you has shifted. It's been months since that night in the garage. She still comes by sometimes, never saying when she'll arrive, never staying too long. We don't talk about what happened, not directly. But it lingers between us, gentle now, like a song we both remember but don't need to play anymore. I think about her differently these days. Not as my aunt, not as someone older or off limits, but as a person, flawed, kind, human, who found her way back into a place she thought she'd lost forever. She doesn't hide as much now. The sharp edges in her voice have softened. She laughs easier, though still not often. Sometimes she'll sit on the old stool by the door while I work, reading from her phone or just watching quietly. Every once in a while, I'll catch her tracing that faint scar on her wrist, a habit she never broke. But she doesn't pull her sleeve down anymore. As for me, I stopped waiting for her to explain herself. Somewhere along the way, I realized that forgiveness isn't something you ask for. It's something that happens when you finally see the other person clearly. I used to think she was the one who had to make sense of what we were. Now I know it was never about defining it. It was about learning to live inside the spaces between what's allowed and what's real. She taught me that love, the kind that lasts, doesn't always look like promises or happy endings. Sometimes it's just the quiet decision to show up anyway. To sit in the same silence and not run from what it says. A few nights ago, she brought me an old photograph, one from before I even remembered her. My father, her brother, standing beside the same motorcycle I fixed the day she came back. She said he used to spend hours in this garage too, talking about the future like it was something he could hold. We didn't say much after that. Just looked at the picture together until the light outside turned soft and gold. Then she placed it on the shelf, between two rusted tools, and said, "It belongs here." I think that's what this story really is, finding where things belong again. Not perfectly, not like they used to, but enough. And maybe that's what love grows into when it's done pretending to be something else. Not a spark or a storm, but a quiet understanding that stays even when the noise fades. When she left that evening, she said, "Take care of yourself." I almost said you too. But what came out instead was, "See you soon." She smiled. And for once, it didn't feel like a promise or a goodbye. Just truth. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?